it to you in a few slides into my presentation. Because inherently, you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur, that's for sure. Now, the irony of ironies is that we've been having a bit of technology difficulty today setting up my presentation, and I founded a technology company, so bear with us. We're doing some makeshift things here so that you guys can get the full presentation that I prepared. Let me just switch to the prezo really quickly. And so I titled my presentation, Entrepreneurship and Personal Enterprise, Starting a Company at the Worst Possible Time. And the reason why I titled that, the presentation that, is because I'm not familiar with what the other speakers spoke about when they came here and what they focused on, but I'm sure quite a few of them talked about money and profit and bottom line and cash flow break even and all those types of things. And I actually founded my company along with my two partners for reasons that had nothing to do with money, which is quite unusual. I'm pretty conventional in my background. I even went to Harvard Business School, which please do not hold that against me after Cornell. In spite of the fact I still managed to be an entrepreneur. But the reason why I had founded the company was, at the time, me and my partners were at Roadrunner, which is a broadband internet service provider, if you're not familiar with that company, that then was owned by Time Warner and AT&T, Microsoft, Compaq, and Advanced Newhouse. And I think now Compaq is part of HP, and the whole company, all of Roadrunner now is owned by Time Warner Cable and Time Warner since the AOL merger. And I was at Roadrunner when AOL acquired Time Warner, which was an interesting experience for all of us. But during that period of time, on September 8th, 2000, my father had passed away. And I was also going through a lot of personal health issues myself. I was told I might have thyroid cancer. The day after his funeral, I had to have a biopsy on my thyroid, and one thing led to another, and by December 26th, the day after Christmas that year, I'd had to have my thyroid removed, which if anyone in this audience has had anyone that's had their thyroid removed, they know that it's a pretty traumatic experience on the body, because it's a necessary organ, so it can be quite a shock to your system. And I remember after both of those experiences, I had decided, and we had been talking about it for a while, the two guys that I started the company with, about starting a company or doing a management buyout of the particular area that we focused on within Roadrunner. But after that experience, especially after my surgery and my dad passing away so close to each other, I had said, right, let's do this. And I really don't care that the technology bubbles burst. I really don't care that, well, we were kind of going through an Adelphia scandal at the time, so cable and broadband internet and the software space in particular that we were in was not very popular whatsoever. I was like, all I want to do is make sure that I have some control over my professional environment, so that when I wake up in the morning, if I'm going to work this hard, and I always work hard for everything, that I'm working for myself, that I can work for people and with people that I like, and that I'm doing something that I'm enjoying, so that I'm having fun every single day. And so when we started the company, we actually started the company knowing that for years it was going to be just a game of survival. Because the type of company that we started, it's a lot of high upfront capital, so we had to put in hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop the technology. It wasn't a popular space at the time, and so we knew that we were going into a game of survival versus, say maybe typical entrepreneurs might be highly optimistic and think they're going into a game, and all entrepreneurs are unusually optimistic because it's kind of a crazy space. But thinking that, within 6 months we're going to be making all this money, or within a year, we knew it was going to be quite a few years. And we wanted to retain control of the company. So we weren't really interested in going out and getting large amounts of outside financing, because then otherwise it kind of defeated the purpose. And the opportunity that we were going into is a space that I would not be surprised, and even Pedro was like, please explain to me exactly what it is that your company does, because I've looked at the website, I've read the articles on you, and I still don't quite get it. And the reason why most people don't quite get it, even my friends and family, is because we don't sell to the consumer, we sell to service providers in the broadband space. And so a consumer very rarely would know that we exist. And what we do is we provide technology that allows the broadband service providers to give you advanced functionality or automate parts of your service activation or various things that need to happen behind the scenes for you to be able to have broadband internet or voice over IP or any of those types of services. And there were a couple of things that we did that were very unique in the industry where we saw the opportunity. One was that we had discovered a way to standardize the technology, which was huge for our space, because all of the broadband service providers have these buildings or large rooms called data centers where they have all the technology that allows them to offer broadband internet to consumers. And all of these data centers were different. When the industry was first starting out, we had no idea that it was going to be a mainstream industry. When the cable providers were upgrading their network, they were doing it for video. They weren't doing it thinking that they would be offering broadband internet and that such a large percentage of people would be using. That was kind of icing on the cake. So when they were developing these data centers to offer broadband internet, they weren't doing it in any standardized way, which means that whenever they wanted to further automate or add advanced functionality to these data centers, they had to do it on a one-off basis. So they would hire a consulting firm or other specialists in the industry. And we had basically come across something that was common to each of these data centers, which was a dumb box called the DHCP server. And that server assigned out IP addresses to people on a lease basis. And that's all it did. It said, hey, John, you can use this IP address to be able to surf the internet for 2 days, then we're taking it back. Sue, then you can use it, and then we're taking it back. And they had to move to that because at first when we had static IP addresses, the internet became so popular, we start to run out of them. And when I say we, I mean, the internet industry in general. And so they moved to this dynamic protocol. So every broadband service provider, especially in the cable space, had these DHCP servers. And for the most part, Cisco had about 80% of the market. So most of them were these Cisco DHCP server boxes that were consistent across all data centers. So what we thought was, God, how can we turn this dumb box into an intelligent bridge, then bridge off of that and add the functionality in parallel to the existing systems. And once we were no longer trying to change the stuff that was already in the data center and have it instead run alongside the systems that were in the data center, we could standardize the systems, and we've been awarded a patent for it, and it did revolutionize our industry, but it took a long time to kind of get to that point because you have to obviously develop the technology. We had to set up a lab, and it was quite expensive to do so, especially on our own dime and or begging partners such as Cisco, et cetera, to lend us boxes and equipment for our development lab. So in that process of getting to the point where I am now with next generation broadband, I did, obviously, and I'm sure this was a very common thing, make, I don't want to say mistakes, but I learned quite a few life lessons. And one of the life lessons I learned was actually here at Cornell. When I was an undergrad, I took Professor Ben Daniel's entrepreneurship and enterprise class. I don't know if undergrads are still allowed to take that class, but I highly recommend it. It was really, really good. And I had a friend of mine who was a design student in the architecture school, myself, and then another guy. We joined together to develop this company called Topac. And Philip, who was the design student, and I had been working in London doing internships separately, but just kind of coincidentally. And we had bumped into each other in London before we came back that semester and took this class. And he was telling me about this designer that he had met named Anthony, and that he was from Ireland, and he had developed this backpack that, you know, was a one-strap backpack, and you could sling it on either shoulder, and, you know, wasn't this really cool? And I know now you guys are thinking, big whoop-de-doo, but this was 20-something years ago, and we only had two-strap backpacks, and we would sling them on one shoulder or the other, but there wasn't a backpack designed for the way students use their backpack. So I was like, oh, this is a fantastic idea. We should take this class and develop the business plan and present on it, which we did, and we ended up winning the Mariani Award for that year. Do they still have the Mariani Award? Yep. So we ended up winning the Mariani Award for that year, and they gave us, Professor Ben Daniel gave us money to start the company. It was such an unusual concept, this is how unusual it is, that we got a patent for the utility of that design, which I put up there. That's our patent. That was my first patent ever. It came out of Cornell in this class. That's the design of the backpack. I actually brought one of the backpacks with me. Looks so archaic now, but at the time it was considered to just be revolutionary. So this is the backpack. We had it manufactured in Schenectady, New York, and we thought, God, we're on our way. Now, first lesson I learned was who you start a business with, your partners, and the roles that you play. And learned this lesson very quickly with this company because Philip, and at that time, I guess I was like 20 or 21, the whole thing was, well, I first met the designer, so I should be president and CEO of the company. And Oliver and I were like, oh, okay. And Philip was a designer himself. He wasn't a business person by nature, hadn't really had any operational experience. I was talking, I was like, oh, I don't know, because, I did junior achievement, I started, like I've always done some companies from selling seeds to greeting cards or whatever. It's very obvious that I was going to end up being even ticket scalping, but it was legal in Maryland if you sold from your home versus at the venue. But I had basically been an entrepreneur all my life, and Oliver also had some business experience, but given this whole dynamic, and Philip's like, no, I brought the idea first, so I should be CEO. We're like, okay. So we had this person who probably in this day and age, knowing what I know now, should have headed up, say, product development, running the company. And he was very much of a creative type, which I am as well, so I respect that. But he didn't have any sort of like backbone for like the operational, the strategic aspect of being, or the visionary aspect of being a CEO, only the visionary aspect of being a designer. And so what that meant was when we had EastPac and Jansport coming to us relatively quickly and saying, oh, we want to get in on this, we understand you guys filed a patent, et cetera. He was like, no, we have to be true to the cause and to the design. And mind you, we only, although it was a lot of money back then, we got $5,000. How much do they get now? Oh, they don't get anything?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. This is 20-something years ago, or 20 years ago. It was $5,000 was a lot of money. So we did have enough money to get started, but that was hardly enough money to compete against Jansport and EastPac, and we needed help. That was the fact of it. We also needed help because we were young and we were students and we didn't really have a lot of experience growing company to the sort of size that we could have grown that company. So long story short, it didn't quite work out, and eventually Jansport and EastPac and others started making these backpacks and stuff with one strap. We got a lot of press with it. New York Times, like tons of people would review this. And we pretty much ended up making nothing really off of it. And I'd learned such a great lesson from that, because I thought, you can have a great idea, you can have a great market for the idea, but if you have the wrong partners, or it wasn't so much that Philip was the wrong partner, but the wrong people in the wrong positions, it can totally stop you from ever realizing the potential of an opportunity that you have in front of you. So with that, and then also all the experience that I had, and at this point, by the time we started Next Generation Broadband, I also had a lot of great mentors. And one of the mentors that I had from my investment banking days was Dick Parsons, who's now the chairman and CEO of Time Warner. At the time, he had just gotten appointed from Dime Savings Bank to be the president of Time Warner. And by that point, he was already COO by the time we started the company. But by the time I went to Roadrunner, he had been president of Time Warner. And by the time I started the company, he had been quasi-demoted with the whole AOL acquisition to being co-COO of the company. And as he was going through this, and I'm going through starting the company, I said, Dick, you see presidents of countries, you see, music stars and movie stars and chairmen and CEOs of companies and top writers and designers, and he just ends up interacting with everyone. And the top in their game, sports stars around the world, not even just in the United States. I'm like, what is the secret sauce as I'm starting this company? Because I know I'm going to be in for a pretty tough ride, because it was not a good environment in which we were starting the company. And he had said to me, and I never forgot this, he said, this is the secret sauce. This is what's common with all of them. They're not, the top sports players, I've seen better sports players, the top singers, well, there's even better singers out there. There's worse singers, but there's always better singers, top writers, et cetera. It's like, the secret sauce is that you have to drag them off the field. You can knock them down, they can be bruised, people can be like, you're the worst player I've ever seen, and they still want to stay on the field. And the interesting thing for me with that is that he was going through that himself at that time. I don't know, I'm trying to think of where you guys would have been in your academic career at that point in time, but it was about, 2001 or so you might remember it. Don't know if you were following it. But here he was, president of Time Warner, in line to be chairman and CEO of one of the largest companies in the world. AOL, a company that I remember him passing on buying, turns around and buys him, buys that company. And all of a sudden, not only is he COO, but he has to be co-COO with someone. A lot of people would have just did the, I'm resigning for family matters sort of game. And whenever you read that in the Wall Street Journal or whatever, that's not, you guys obviously know that's not why they resign. There's always some other better, more interesting story behind it. And he could have easily have done that. A lot of people did that. And he actually took, his own advice and played with his own secret sauce. And then over time, this person left, that person didn't make it, blah, blah, blah. And within, I think it was 2.5 or 3 years, he was chairman and CEO of Time Warner. And he had said to me, right now I know things aren't looking so good, but that secret sauce, they're gonna have to drag me off the field, and I'm 6'5", so it's gonna take a lot of people to drag me off the field. And he did it. 2 or 3 years later, he was chairman and CEO of the company. So I lived by that for the first couple of years of the company, because it was a lot about survival. So then the Etna film, and pazzo means crazy in Italian. The reason why I think that film is so relevant to being an entrepreneur is because the main competitive advantage that you can have over and above anything else as an individual starting a company is to really be passionate and have a strong intent for what you're doing. Like if you're coming into something and you're just focused on the money, and there's another person coming into it and they absolutely love whatever it is, you will never beat them out because they will be thinking about it morning, noon, and night. They'll be on it all the time. They'll be talking to their friends about it. They won't want to get away from it because they love it. So you might as well focus on what you love and enjoy doing because there's so many different ways to make money. I mean, making money actually is a commodity in and of itself. So you might as well enjoy yourself while you're doing it. And that Etna film was a classic example for me because when I got there and I was buying the ticket, I'd already decided that for whatever reason, and you know, it doesn't matter what you love doing, it's your own personal reasons, but for whatever reason, before I went down to Sicily, I have in my BlackBerry, I have an entry called The List. And every time I come up with something that I just really want to do, for whatever reason, maybe I just like it, I think it would be fun, I put it in that list, and nothing stands between me and that list. And climbing Etna to the very top and seeing what it looked like on the inside was something on that list. And then, you know, I go to Italy with Holly, and we get there, and, you know, I find out, oh, no, you can't actually climb to the top of Etna, that's dangerous, you know? And then we go to the stage 1 thing, and we're meeting like the various guides and stuff, and we're talking to them about going to the top, and they're like, well, sometimes we'll sneak people up, but you know, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And basically, we found 2 guides, because you want to be smart about it too. You don't want to be an idiot. Like it would have been one thing for us to sneak up there on our own, but I was asking around for guides that had been up there, because occasionally the guides go up there just to kind of check up on things. So found 2 guides that would take us up, and Holly and I were the only 2 going up, so I thought if we had a 1-for-1 ratio, we would be okay. And beg them and rationalize with them, and I speak, you know, enough Italian to beg, so was able to convince them to take us up there, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But it was very much like starting a company, whereas it was an all-day event for me, and it wasn't just the climbing. Part of it was just finding, you know, convincing, finding the people, you know, other tourists saying, oh, we were trying to go up there too, they're not gonna let you up there. You know, people telling you it can't be done, et cetera, and just holding on to your vision no matter what's going on around you. And being a little bit crazy. The other thing to kind of focus on as an entrepreneur, what are your, you know, individual strengths? Like how can you be innovative in your own way? And one thing that we did, an example of this is, you know, we compete against very large companies, Accenture and large consulting companies like that, as well as some of the software companies like Cisco. And from a marketing perspective, we still own the majority of our company. The 3 of us still own about 80-something% of our company. So we don't have the same sort of marketing budgets that they have. And we also knew that technology in and of itself, especially our type of technology, isn't necessarily interesting to read about, but because of the size of purchase that our systems are, and typically the site license fees alone are like $500,000 or so. And in that time when cable companies were very much watching what sort of capital expenditures they made, we knew that we weren't just selling to engineers. We had to convince the head of marketing, the head of business ops, you know, other non-technical people why they should go with our software and with our technology to differentiate ourselves. And we're new to the industry, so why take a chance with us versus just going with, you know, the old saying of no one ever gets fired for buying IBM, whereas people could get fired for going with us because no one's ever heard of us. And one thing that we had come up with, and which was very, and still is very unusual for our industry, is we would create these cool product guides. And instead of taking out ads in our trade journals and doing advertising that way, we started building this database of the people that we knew were involved in our purchasing process around the world, and they would be CEOs, COOs, head of high-speed internet, regional managers, et cetera. And we would just try to communicate directly with them, and we would catch their attention about 2 to 3 times a year with what we would call our product guide and kit. And this is an example of our latest one. I brought some copies of the guide itself for you guys to have afterwards. But I'd gotten into cricket recently. The Cricket World Cup was coming up, and I have a godson in London from when I'd worked there before who had just started playing cricket. So I just started going to my first cricket matches, and I had no idea what the heck was going on in these games. And so I thought, oh, that would be cool to kind of have our next product guide be about the game of cricket. And then also, we kind of sucker people into reading about our technology by interweaving it with information about our technology and the benefits of it and the architecture, et cetera. And we would usually include some sort of cool gifts. So for this one, we had this cricket shirt as well as a cricket ball, and we'd wrap it all up and just mail it directly to these people. And usually they would just be like, what is this? But they would start reading it, and that was the whole point. So, it worked. The time before, we had an Il Palio guide, because I'd just come from Siena, and that's like a famous horse race in Siena. The one that's coming up, which is top secret, we're about to release it in a month or so, is a guide to Mozart. And not so much around his music, but his life and all the studies, dealing with the effect of his music and whatever on the brain and thinking patterns of the brain, and possibly building, extra synapses and the effect on, even children. And I don't know if you, well, you guys would be too young for this. I was going to say, I don't know if you guys have a lot of friends that have started having kids, but but I hope that that's not yet the case, but I do. And there's a lot of focus around like music while you're pregnant and those types of things. So the next guide's going to be Mozart, and we'll have the CD that's called Mozart for the Mind that goes with it. And it just makes technology a little bit fun. One thing that I had to watch out for, and one of my partners is also from Harvard Business School, and we have a very bad reputation of not turning out entrepreneurs. Basically because they say that HBSers can think their way out of anything. They can always figure out what's going to go wrong, and they spend too much time focusing on that. So one thing I developed for myself is what I call the reasonable man test. And I always like Nike's saying of just do it. So instead of making sure, and I had to do this because it is true, and this is even true for Cornellians. If you have any person that is intelligent and very analytical and strategic, et cetera, you can always figure out what's going to go wrong. So instead, before my mind gets too far ahead of me, if I get to a point that I think a reasonable man would think that this was okay, or woman, then I just basically do it. I just do it. And if I'm wrong, then I try to stay flexible, admit that I'm wrong, and then just keep going from there. Question, extra credit. Does anyone know who that person is in the picture? Yeah, okay, great. I love soccer. Schoolhouse Rock, when we were kids. What does that have to do with business? When parents are looking for, the right school to send their kids to when they're young, they don't just care about, does the school teach science and math and English? If the school taught science and math and English but had a very destructive environment, or no physical education classes, or no music program or social programs or sports or whatever, they would, if they had the ability to, want to send their kid to a school that had, a nurturing environment, that had, social clubs and sports and art classes and a music program and everything. They'd want something, some sort of environment that not only stimulated them intellectually, but allowed them to grow personally and creatively. And so when I was looking at the business, I had asked myself, at what age does that not matter anymore? And I went around asking my partners and other people, that I knew professionally. And when we really thought about it, was there is no age when it doesn't matter anymore. It always matters, but you just manage it as you get older, or you suppress it, or you deal with it because you need the paycheck and you have to pay a mortgage, et cetera. So I took it as a competitive advantage to actually focus on that, and not so much with, gimmicky programs or anything, but just making sure that all of our employees knew that we wanted them not only to professionally grow within our company, but personally grow and creatively grow and be able to focus on things that were important to them over and beyond just the bottom line and making money. And it actually turned out to be a very profitable sort of corporate culture to have. Because when people were starting to leave other small companies as technology companies start to come back in favor over the past few years and the salaries start to go up, et cetera, no one left our company. I mean, we keep our employees because, at the end of the day, you can only do so much with money, and then you get to a point, if you've been in an environment where you really enjoy coming to work, and you've been in an environment where you don't really enjoy coming to work, there is some amount of money that you would trade that off for. It's different for each person, but there is definitely some amount of money for that. And you can still be profitable and competitive as a company, and probably even more so, because I know during that period, that the dark ages, the first few years for us when we were in a period of survival, a lot of companies fell through the wayside that had, $15, $20, $30 million worth of capital pumped into them and still went under, or had to sell out because they were about to go under. Because you just didn't have that same level of commitment from the employees, because they didn't really like what they were doing and or the environment. And so if you didn't have the money to pay them, then they weren't going to stay. And the first people to go are your best employees, because they're the most valuable. And so I promised John that I had a question for you guys. I don't know if this is the sort of question he was expecting from an entrepreneurship class or for an entrepreneurship class. So this is your question. What effect does corporate culture have on your role as global citizen? That's the question. That is the question.
They've got the paper, so they know what to do. So, do you have more?
No, I was just going to show. Oh, I just had one little move thing clip
You
that
can
was
do
going
that, and then we can do Q&A while they're writing, if that works for you.
Yeah, I'm just going to show one little thing to finish off with. Okay. Is this still on? Yeah. Okay, so you can leave that on, because I'm about to show one more thing. So can I go forward with now? Great. Okay, so entrepreneurs and businessmen and women come in all different flavors. And I had met a very unique one a couple of years ago, and he had given me this advice. He was like, Tiffany, you should just trust your feelings and follow your gut. And I happened to have it on film. So I thought you guys might like to see a short clip of this relatively unusual and well-known entrepreneur giving me advice. Can you guys hear it?